My name is Anita Dare. I love books. I love to read them. I love to write them. I've traveled all over where I've found incredible stories, but the ones that are closest to my heart are the ones from right here. This is Made in Manitoba, Stories from Home, a show about Manitoba books and the authors who write them.
Welcome to Made in Manitoba, Stories from Home. Our guest today is Winnipeg novelist, designer, and publisher MC Joudrey, author of Fanonymous. Matt describes his novel as being set in tomorrow's future with hints of fantasy, a whisper of mystery, and a dash of cyberpunk. He's here to talk about it and the evolution of his publishing house, At Bay Press. Welcome, MC Joudrey.
Thanks for having me, Anita.
Can I call you Matt?
Of course you can.
Good, because MC sounds all sort of rappy-like.
I would prefer Matt anyway. That's perfect.
Wonderful. So Fanonymous, as I recall, is your fourth book, but your third novel. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
How would you like to describe it? Tell us what the book's about.
The book sort of, its origins kind of came from two interesting moments in my sort of like day-to-day work life when I was living in Toronto. And what I had done was I was working in finance, and I found it was such a greed-ridden industry that I struggled with it quite a bit. And I remember coming home from work one day on the subway, and I get off the subway at Davisville Station, which is it's actually the main station for the Toronto Transit Commission. And I come upstairs, and they were doing this book sale, and they do it every year at their sort of main station there. And I found this book on literature, and it was all different literary terms. And I said, "Well, I'm in publishing too. I would love to get this book." And the lady's like, "It's $1." And I went to my wallet, and I didn't have any cash in my wallet. And she goes, "Oh, there's a bank machine right there." So I went over to the bank machine, and I took out a $20 bill, but it cost me $3 to take out a $20 bill to buy a $1 book. Mm-hmm. So that was the first sort of like moment that sort of, I would say, was inception for this book.
The idea of something to do with literature, art, numbers, greed, finance, not to give too much away, but
that's exactly it. And most importantly, the banking industry. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a really big thing for me was taking a couple stabs at the banking industry in Canada.
It's chilling. Some of the this near future could be like, yeah, it could be now. It could be very easily now. It is chilling. The idea is how quickly something
That's right.
could really turn. But tell us in terms of plot. Like somebody's looking for a good read. Is this
Right.
Who's this about? What journey are they on?
So it follows a guerrilla street artist, and this guerrilla street artist is on the run, but you don't know why. And he's come from New York City to Winnipeg, and he thinks it's the one place on the planet that nobody will ever look for him. It's the one place he can hide and disappear. And he gets here, and all the cars have been have undergone this hack where all of the automobiles in Winnipeg have just stopped working suddenly. So that brings a lot of attention from law enforcement to the city of Winnipeg. So the one place he thought he'd be able to escape and disappear now has all eyes on it. And so it sort of goes from there. And
yet he decides to stay.
Yes.
Yeah. He gets involved with a group of characters. The characters are fascinating. I mean, honestly, I'm completely drawn in as I'm reading this, and he meets his first friend on a bus.
That's right.
That was an interesting character.
Yeah, Horace Mackey.
Where did you find inspiration for these really intriguing characters? Very textured, very unique. They just sort of jump off the page.
I think mostly it's just the people that you know. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that I drew a lot from different friends of mine because they're quite an eccentric bunch. But also too, the strangers of Winnipeg played a very important role in the book too. And so there's one main character I just sort of always called him the old man in the book. And this character is probably one of the most eccentric. He dresses in these wild Hawaiian shirts and often doesn't wear any pants, and he's just a really interesting character. And I remember seeing this fella at a bus stop right on Portage up by Polo Park, and he was in this full tiger jumpsuit and a zip-up that was the most insane looking thing, and it was in the dead of winter, and he was just in a tiger jumpsuit. And then of course everybody else around him were in these sort of like drab grays and browns, winter colors, because they were in their jackets and stuff. So I could make him a character.
Yeah, and you do. I remember that outfit, and just he's a pretty interesting character, as they all are. You've got so many ideas, really important ideas that are worked in and interwoven with these characters and the things that they say. They make some really interesting observations. Like I noticed, news today, same as yesterday. People will think today will be different. I mean, I read that and I thought,
yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. You also address with art and politics and all of these other things. You also really look at technology and make your reader think that, where are we going? Mm-hmm. We're moving fast, and maybe this is not necessarily a good thing. At least, that's sort of what I read. I noticed there's a part in here that you even foresee the death of books, of printed books.
Yeah.
It says, now we no longer have printed books. Gone. Poof.
Yep.
And it's not that
like
far
that.
In the future. And
No.
you actually show us how everything happens and how everything happens with the books. I thought that was really terrific. And one of the characters, one of your characters in the book, the one that is least into technology,
right,
he's the happiest. And then you have another character,
That's
Claire,
right.
who's pretty unforgettable, because I
Yeah.
think we all know a Claire.
Yeah.
Tell us about Claire.
So I sort of gave her this nickname in the novel of the iPhone addict, or the cell phone addict, and she never looks up from her screen. Mm-hmm. And I think I've just seen so many of those people who just never look up from their screen, and their screen is their life, to the point where it's a very quiet, disturbing addiction. And so that was a really important thing for me, which is not a subtle point that I was making about technology. Mm-hmm. And that I guess there was a bit of the sort of like the Oppenheimer effect. Just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should, right? So creating this technology without really thinking about where it's going and how it affects our lives. And I use cell phones. I use computers. I love them, but. When I say I love them, I love what they can do, not what they are doing. Mm-hmm. And I didn't write this book because of what they can do. I'm writing this book because of what they are currently doing to us. And I think that's the biggest important fact with that main character, is just showing that it's a quiet, crumbling erosion of life for that person. And I don't believe that cell phones bring us any closer. No. In fact, I think they put distance between us, and that's a key point in the book too.
I think that came through very clearly, and yet with everything that you're showing us through the lives of these characters, you also work in some humor, which I hope we can get into perhaps a little bit more in our next bit. You're tuned into Made in Manitoba, Stories from Home, with today's guest, Matt Joudrey, author of Fanonymous. I'm your host, Anita Dare. We'll be right back. If you're just joining us, we're speaking today with Winnipeg-based author Matt Joudrey. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me back again.
Matt Joudrey, MC Joudrey.
That's
you
right.
keep a pretty low profile on the internet, I noticed, because having you on the show, I read your book, and then I wanted to Google you, as I do everybody I meet. Everyone here, perhaps? No. I mean, it's what we do, right? That's our go-to for information these days.
It is.
We do that before we pick up the phone and we actually talk to the person, which we did. We talked.
Thankfully.
But You don't have much of a footprint. You're hard to find on the internet. Is that on purpose?
I think so. Yeah, I don't really. I think it's twofold. I don't have the time, and I don't have the desire.
Are you talking social media?
Yeah. I feel, I guess, whatever it is that's worthwhile that I have to say, I'll probably say in the books. Otherwise, I don't really have any good quips and quick things to say over Twitter. And as a publisher, we have to have those social media outlets.
It's part of our fabric now, whether we like it or not. I know I struggle with this all the time.
Well, it's where information goes about book launches or somebody won an award, or you know what I mean. So you share that information, right, so that other people are aware. And there's definitely good aspects about those things. It's just
you don't put yourself out there.
No
you
interest.
Choose to have it in person. Well, you're Matt, and Anita
That's
and
right.
Matt are sitting here having a conversation. But
That's
you
the
use
idea.
for a professional name, you use MC Joudrey. Have you always done that? Gone MC? Like, I'm just wondering,
why is what you're wondering.
Are your different personas? Do you put on a different hat when you're MC? I don't know.
I don't think so. I think originally I just I didn't want to be pigeonholed as a male author, and so I just thought, MC. I've never put my photograph on any of my books either, and that's by design as well, and so I just always sort of felt that. If you just picked up the book and you read it, you wouldn't really be thinking of the voice as a male writer, or at least that was the hope. And I've met a number of readers at different book signings and conventions and festivals, and I didn't realize you were a man, and so
That's gratifying.
Yeah, which is great, and that's always been the point. I think was just read the book. Don't worry about who I am. So. What
did you read growing up? What books really captured you?
I certainly got my start with reading from the sequential art, the graphic novel medium. That was certainly what captivated me. I love the visual aspect. I love visual storytelling, and I love the movement of and understanding cinematic panel structure, lighting, mood, all of that was sort of gleaned from comic books. And I have this great memory of my dad taking me down to a comic book store in Montreal, which was where we were living at the time, and he said, "I'm going to give you $5 and go in and buy your first comic book." And I was a little kid, and I went and picked a comic book off the shelf and took it home, and that was it for me. And then my folks started buying me books, all the time. And he likes reading. Buy him books. It's a good problem to have. So
it is a good problem.
Yeah.
I like it. You've moved around a fair bit. We had this conversation because we have that in common, and we have something else in common. We both started out on the East Coast.
Yes, that's right. I'm from Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia, Cape Breton Island.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. And you were just talking, we were talking in the break, and you told me just a story about IKEA that makes so much sense now because it relates to the book. So
to the novel, yeah.
What is this thing about IKEA?
So in the novel, one of the more interesting and eclectic things about Winnipeg is there's this giant piece of real estate which is the IKEA, and it was a really big deal for Winnipeggers when it came. It was this exciting thing, and I always sort of saw it as an eyesore myself. Oh no! But anyway,
Just a little side note: did you know that giant IKEA sign that sticks up in the air? That's a navigational aid. That's a reporting point for aircraft coming into the Winnipeg airport.
There you go.
There you go.
So I had this idea about having these feral children that just live in the IKEA. Their parents have either left them or lost them, and they just live there now. They just roam free, and IKEA is a fully functioning environment for them. They've got food and places to sleep and places to hide. And
that was one of those brilliant parts of the book. I just thought, this is so great, because you could just see it, and you take it a step further, and you have one of your characters in the book that, it's his job to mind the IKEA children. And we first meet him.
That's right.
When we first meet him, the main character notices when he lifts up the sleeve that he's got these bite
Great
marks.
memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got all these
Yeah,
bite marks from the children, and
Yeah, and we don't find out why until much later.
we don't find out why till much later. And as a kid in Nova Scotia, they had this IKEA, and I was very little, and my folks took us there to go do some shopping, and there was this room filled with these like plastic balls or whatever. It was like a kid room, and they just kind of tossed us in there, my brother and I, and then they went off and did their shopping. And at first, you fall in these balls, and you're thinking to yourself, "This is the greatest thing ever," right? Because it's made for kids, and you're there. But then I thought, are they coming back? Like, is this it? Like, see you later. Like, is that the? And so I think it came from there, because IKEA is huge, and it took them hours to go through it. So we're stuck in this room for hours, and I thought, I think that's it. I think they left us.
Okay, so I'm laughing, and that's terrible because you were probably traumatized as a child.
Yeah.
So that's why you've carried this memory, and you've
That's
worked
right.
it out in this brilliant novel. Was a little therapeutic working that out.
Yeah, it was a little therapeutic. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And Winnipeg is such an interesting city. Like I think I wrote something at the beginning of the book, like a little author's note that I can't remember it. I'll have to read it here. Because I thought it captured Winnipeg perfectly, which is...
I think you capture Winnipeg perfectly. You get all the high points in there, including cells.
That's right.
Yep.
So it says, Winnipeg is a real city. It has roads, buildings, and lights. There are cinemas and grocery stores. People drive automobiles and raise children. Winnipeg is located at the center of Canada, and then I give the coordinates. Although this book is a work of fiction, all of this will happen. And I sort of felt like if it could ever happen anywhere, it would happen in Winnipeg.
Yeah. I really like that idea, and you also pay tribute to Winnipeggers because with the whole thing about the cars stopping, you'd think some populations would go into a panic.
Yeah.
Winnipeggers just carry on. We just
I
suck
feel
it
like
up and
every
carry
other city
on.
would have fallen apart. Everything just would have like entered into complete anarchy and chaos. Whereas I just feel like Winnipeggers would have got up and just said, okay, well, the car doesn't work. Well, I got to get to work, so I better hoof it.
Yeah, and this actually works in some ideas too about there's a large number of Winnipeggers. We have groups of Winnipeggers that would like to see more walking, more cycling,
That's right.
and things like that. So you actually work that in a very pleasing way.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
because you just see now it's like the city is just filled with these rusting hulks of cars, and everybody's just walking or biking, and the city is invested in this sort of hydro bus, electric bus system, and that's really the only operating sort of, we'll call it, transportation for people.
Public transportation.
Yeah, so it's just, I felt like Winnipeggers would just roll with the punches.
And we do.
Yeah. You have to in this kind of climate.
You're watching Made in Manitoba, Stories from Home with today's guest, Matt Joudrey, author of Fanonymous. I'm your host, Anita Dare. When we come back, we'll learn more about the evolution of a publishing house through its book covers. Welcome back to Made in Manitoba, Stories from Home. I'm your host, Anita Dare. We've been speaking with author MC, aka Matt Joudrey, about his novel Fanonymous. In this segment, Matt will take us on a bit of a visual journey of his publishing house, At Bay Press. Welcome back, Matt. Before we get into talking about At Bay Press,
Right.
we were talking about your book, and we were talking about a little bit about you in the last segment, being
That's
a designer.
right.
How did all of this come about? I mean, you started out as a kid, well, apart from being a kid abandoned in IKEA, if we move past that trauma, you were a
Yeah,
kid in
my
a comic
parents-
book, loving comic books, and as a visual arts person, a designer. So how did you then become author and publisher?
That's a good question too. I knew I always wanted to work in the arts in some way. I wanted to create things. That was really important to me. I don't know why. I honestly don't. I don't know where the drive comes from that. I think maybe it's genetic. I don't know. But I really wanted to create things, and shape them and mold them and make them into something, and hopefully stuff that people would enjoy and like, and at the bare minimum be entertained by. And that was always the goal. And so I think that drove my passion for my illustration and the writing and all of that. But I think that also was what drove me towards my choices for post-secondary school, which was graphic design and computer animation and classical animation. So those are the three items that I took and at the lovely Red River College in Winnipeg. And when I got out, I met my wife and we moved back to Toronto, which is where I had moved from to Winnipeg to go to school with my folks. Oh. And so when we moved back to Toronto, that's when we started the publishing house. And we started in a little apartment in Toronto on the 28th floor downtown, and slowly it evolved into what it is today. So
that's wonderful. You now talking about the evolution, because that's
right.
what we promised
yeah.
folks. So you've brought some artwork with you today.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us what you've got?
Okay, what do I have here? Well, we've got a bunch of great goodies here. This is an older book that I did. This is the dust jacket. So these are the front. This is the front flap. This is the back flap, back cover, front cover artwork, and this is the original black and white illustration of it. And then some of my markings here that sort of were my own guide of what I was going to do and where the it says titles here and that kind of thing. So that sort of that would get scanned in, and then I'd play around with the colors digitally.
Because you're a visual artist and a graphic designer, you're really hands-on as a publisher.
Yes.
Getting really involved in your covers, which are so beautiful. I mean, any author would just be so excited to see the detail. I am so impressed with, okay, little sidebar, I have to say I noticed with, first thing that I did is, I took off this cover for Fanonymous, and I noticed, there's a different title on the inside.
Right.
It says "'Tis the Season," which actually has very
significant importance to the book.
Yeah,
for
along
sure.
with the pomegranate.
That's right.
So there are all kinds of really interesting things, and these numbers, which
the numbers are all the numbers that have been assigned to me throughout my life.
I wasn't going to mention that because somebody can totally steal your identity now. It's just these are all your numbers.
They're all my old employee numbers, student numbers, postal codes, phone numbers, those things that have been assigned to me throughout my life, and I couldn't get over how many numbers I've been. Mm-hmm. And that really played a big a factor on my identity. So,
and you do like numbers.
I do like numbers. I worked in numbers.
Conflicted with how numbers are used, perhaps by banks and whatnot. Before you show us that, because I do want to carry on with this, I just want to mention Charles Wood Road Stories, your short story collections.
That's right.
Set in Winnipeg and nominated for a book award.
That's right. Yeah, for a Manitoba Book Award, and. The actual little novella that's in that book was based on true events here in Winnipeg, so I had a lot of fun making that one. Okay,
so carry on. I also know, I don't know the story behind
the original artwork. So this is sort of a graffiti typography design that I did for this cover, and it's all the Winnipeg streets that I just did in succession, like it was just one great big mural. And then I had it scanned.
These are all the names of streets?
Yeah, these are all the Winnipeg streets.
So if I took out my reading glasses so I could actually see something,
I don't know what street you live on, but
but I see there's Queenston.
Yeah,
this is just like one of those puzzles where things jump out at you, and that's the house you're going to buy next.
That's it.
Or something. honey, I got news.
And you had mentioned on our phone conversation, you said there were a lot of Easter eggs, and that's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little hidden things in the book.
Does that go back to your love of comic cons and comic books?
Yeah,
and that world?
It's just discovery.
Yeah.
It's just I love discovering new things and acquiring new knowledge, and I love collecting. And so these little hidden items, these little hidden gems, and it doesn't have to be something physical. It doesn't have to be something truly tangible. It can just be something like that, where you just discover something about a book, and then you're like, oh, and those moments are the best moments.
Pleasing as an author putting them in, and as a designer, and so
That's right.
pleasing as a reader as well. Like I just
Exactly.
saw this, I thought, this is so cool.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, well, that's the
Yeah.
idea. Like I said, at the bare minimum, entertainment, but hopefully a little bit more than that.
Yeah, very nice. Okay, so what else have you got to show us?
So this was the cover. This was the illustration for the back cover. We'll call them the 3 Winnipeg elements, the mosquito, the bison, and the dragonfly.
The mysterious bison.
Yeah.
It's another element I really loved about this book. Significant in a way that you don't imagine in the beginning.
That's right. Yeah, and we don't want to reveal too much, but
No.
and then some of this is like this is older comic book artwork that
Okay.
I had done,
All right.
and some pages from St. Augustine, and
So did you did these for various comic books, or you created your
no,
own
this
comic
was my
books?
own comic book. Yeah, this was my own graphic novel that I did. I guess back in 2004 I started it, and some of these pages are from 2007 and 2008. I try to date everything so that I keep it all straight. And just I do all the even the halftones I do by hand, and I chose a cool halftone, mostly instead of a warm halftone, just because of the fact that this is a bit more of a dark comic, and I wanted that cooler aspect to play a factor. I don't know if it hits home with the reader or not, but
So cooler as a person who's not a visual artist, and I get you. I think I know what you mean, but in case
Right.
some people don't know, cooler as in grays and blues, and
That's right.
and maybe a hint of green. Whereas warmer, you'd get into more colors like
You got
red
it.
and orange and yellow.
100%, 100% correct. That's exactly it.
Okay.
This one's a really cool one that I had fun doing. This was for one of our fiction annuals. The theme was jilted love, and I love the bleeding heart aspect. And this just took me back to my my elementary school days, where you took the straw and you kind of blew the ink, and that's all that is.
The ink blot. That's
Yeah.
a heart, and it's beautiful. And I
Yeah.
love everything that you've brought.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much for
Yeah, it was
bringing
a
in
lot
your
of fun.
artwork, and I've just really enjoyed our conversation today.
Me too.
Yeah, well, I hope that we can talk again, and maybe
Absolutely.
I'd really like to pick your brain about a little bit more in this book, but we'll get into that later.
Okay.
You've been watching Made in Manitoba Stories from Home, a show about Manitoba books and authors. Our guest today has been Matt Joudrey. On behalf of our entire crew, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or comments about the show, information will be on your screen in a GIF. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for sharing time with us. I'm Anita Dare.